Welcome to VidZette, your home for careful consideration of our common concerns. I'm Dr. Ted Noel, and it's 6 o'clock on the East Coast. Today, I'd like to talk about two or three things after we hit one key item. It's primary day in Florida here, and it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out on who's going to take on my current Democrat Congress critter, Stephanie Murphy, who will do only the bidding of Nancy Pelosi. And it will be interesting to see some other things as well as we look at other primaries across the country. Our first subject for tonight is John McCain. Now, John McCain was a U.S. Senator. He was a war hero. Don't get anything wrong about that. He spent 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton as a leader of what we might call the resistance there. The problem is that once he got to Washington, D.C. after his military career, he stayed there the rest of his life. And as Donald Trump came in, he became the resistance. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Let's take a look. John McCain was, in fact, a warmonger. He pushed for involvement in all sorts of places that the United States had no business visiting. He supported Planned Parenthood funding. Anything that the Republicans might do to cut Planned Parenthood off of the family or off of the federal trough was a non-starter for him. And you've got to ask, wait a minute, why would we fund an abortion mill? Because abortion is not now and never has been health care. It's been a lefty cause. Let's also look at his signature legislative accomplishment, which he did with Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, a hard lefty, the McCain-Feingold Finance Reform Bill. No, it was finance strangulation bill. Basically, what it was designed to do was to make sure that you protected all of the incumbents by limiting contributions so that the incumbents could gather all the money and then the challengers never had a chance to do anything. Bad news. Left wing all the way, designed to perpetrate the swamp. But then, as Donald Trump ran for office, John McCain came up and Donald Trump dissed him. He said, I don't think he's a hero. I don't like people who've been captured. I'm sorry. I think our president stepped in it there, but still, John McCain held a grudge. And it's pretty obvious from all the things he said as he was dying over the last few months. That's exactly what he had. He campaigned on Obamacare repeal. But when he had a chance to vote for it in the Senate, he said, no, not interesting, not going to do it. And he stood with Chuck Schumer. Not a good idea. Definitely not holding up the honor of his campaign. Remember, our president constantly talks about promises made, promises kept. John McCain was a politician. He would say whatever served him. So it was promises made, promises broken. Standard politician fare. Then as things went on, he actually worked against Donald Trump's election. He was happy to take campaign finance money from Donald Trump when Donald Trump was a businessman and he was running. But when Donald Trump ran, what did he do? He passed the Steele dossier to the FBI. And there is a certain amount of data that suggests that he helped finance that dossier, which said he was actively colluding with a foreign power to overturn our election process. He dissed Trump's travel ban, which the Supreme Court has upheld. He dissed Trump over a call to the Aussie Prime Minister, a call that he should never have had any information about. No one should have ever known about, but it was leaked. And oh, guess what? He's a leaker while we're at it. He was a never Trumper. He he dissed Trump again and again on foreign policy. But we have to ask, whose foreign policy worked better, John McCain's or Trump's? So all things said, I don't have a whole lot of use for John McCain. He's dead. Let's pray that the governor of Arizona picks someone good. I heard a possibility, two possibilities I think would be wonderful. Mark Levin is suggesting Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is from Arizona. He is an internal medicine doctor, very, very conservative, and he happens to be a Muslim who thinks that Islam should be reformed. This is a smart guy and would be a good choice. Another one is Katie Pavlich, who is editor-in-chief of townhall.com. And she, again, would be another good choice. So who knows who he'll pick, but those are two that are good in the line. But once again, the big thing we have to look at is his record is he was a member of the swamp. And if we drain the swamp by his passing, we don't celebrate the death of anyone. We celebrate his removal from the field of battle and replacement by someone who can be a real soldier in this war we've got. All right. Speaking of soldiers in the war, let's move on to the next item in the stack of stuff, as Rush puts it. Attorney General Sessions. We've all seen the tweets running back and forth about Attorney General Sessions. I wish I had an Attorney General who would do his job. If I'd known he was going to recuse himself, we would have a different Attorney General, and on and on. And Trump is constantly saying these things. And I'm brought back to think of, what was Trump's favorite line? Did anybody remember his line from The Apprentice? Oh, yeah, you're fired. Jeff Sessions works for Donald Trump. Donald Trump can fire him and replace him with anybody who he wants, who was appointed to an office by him and was confirmed by the Senate. Now, that's called an interim appointment, and it only lasts a certain amount of time, I don't know, a few months, but that's somebody who can be there for a while until you get somebody else in. And there are a number of good attorneys in other places who could take over the job on a moment's notice. But you have to ask, why is Trump not pushing for Sessions to actually go? And there's a fellow on Twitter named Thomas Wictor, Wictor. It's worth following this guy. He's a very, very sharp fellow. And Thomas Wictor is suggesting that this is actually theater. Now, remember, one of Trump's favorite books is Sun Tzu's ancient tome, The Art of War. And in The Art of War are a number of different things that you do to defeat your enemy. One part is misdirection. Another part is coming to battle with an overwhelming force so they never fight back. One would think about the economics of Turkey and Russia on that count. But when you look at it, as I look back, I have two brothers who are one step removed from Jeff Sessions. Both of them know different people who know him personally. And their comment was, no one ever wanted to be in court against Jeff Sessions because Jeff Sessions came into court with so much material put together that if you were defending a charge that he brought against you, you might as well put your hands up and put the cuffs on. You were headed for jail. And it may be that what's really going on is a bit of kabuki theater here, that Trump is putting up a fight. And you notice that Sessions will fight back a little bit here and there, but basically just merrily goes about his work. And remember, there are 20-odd leak investigations underway, but you don't hear anything about it. You just hear the number. We do know that one of them ended up in jail, this loser called Reality Winner. In reality, she's a loser, and she's now in on a 5-year sentence for leaking. So there are others going to come up. And Sessions appointed a fellow named Huber in the Salt Lake City office to do some investigations. Sessions didn't say about what. We also have an inspector general who brought out that big report on the Hillary emails that we had a while back, and he's going through how was the investigation handled. What about the Hillary email stuff in detail, walking through that? There's a whole lot we just don't know much about. So it may be that Sessions is actually going along and doing the job well. Question arises. The problem is Sessions recused himself from the Russian investigation. Since it is not a Russia investigation anymore, can he kick Mueller to the curb? Interesting question of tactics. If Sessions already has somebody going after this stuff and just hasn't told us, then maybe the best thing to do is let it play. The other thing is, if you kick Mueller to the curb, it becomes a political issue. You're squelching the investigation. And it's probably best if Sessions were to unrecuse himself and simply go to Mueller and say, look, here are the limits of what you do. You go no further than these very strict limits. When you're done with those, you bring your report. And, oh, by the way, if you've already done what you need to do in there, your report comes tomorrow. And it's a political calculation, and probably not a good idea to ditch Mueller. Oh, I'm beginning to sound like Q. I don't know much about Q. Is Sessions being blackmailed? I kind of doubt it. The guy was too much of a straight shooter to be blackmailed. I really think this is more theater. And Trump's been pretty good at theater because all of his tweets dangle these little shiny objects in front of the little kitty cats of the media, and they keep pawing at it and jumping at it and jumping at it. And there's never anything there while he just goes along doing his job. I wouldn't put it past him at all. While we're dealing with legal stuff, let us deal with a doctrine called the fruit of the poisonous tree. Now, you may have heard me mention this before. And basically, what happens is if you have the classic is cops stop you for a traffic violation. You give them your license, registration, insurance card, and whatnot. Then if they start opening your trunk and digging through your car and find you've got drugs in your car, guess what? They never had reasonable cause to look in your car. They never asked your permission. And as a result, this is what's called a tainted search. And none of the evidence from that search can be brought into court. It is legally fruit of the poisonous tree. You can't use an illegal method to get to a legal result. And I would strongly suggest all of you go back and look at a June 22 op-ed by David Rivkin and Elizabeth Foley in the Wall Street Journal. It is a marvelous analysis. These are constitutional law scholars. And they talk about the fruit of the poisonous tree. And they go back and look at several cases. U.S. versus Russell in 73 says that the conduct of law enforcement agents can be so outrageous that it can bar the government from using any of their tools to convict someone. Does that sound like Stroke or any of the Page, any of those others? Then a year later in Blackledge versus Perry, the prosecutor's, quote, likelihood of vindictiveness tainted the initiation of the proceedings, and the case got thrown out. 1974. Let's go on to 1987. Young versus ex rel Vuitton. Prosecutors must be free from any personal bias. Does anybody remember tweets from Trump about 13 angry Democrats? Do we remember one of the prosecutors on Mueller's team sending a love note to the former deputy attorney general about, "I am in awe of your courage," when she refused to carry out Trump's order on the travel ban, the first version of it, and Trump fired her the next day for insubordination? Personal bias. Then in 2016, that's only 2 years ago, in Williams v. Pennsylvania, there was a case where bias from 25 years ago was enough to disqualify a judge from hearing a case. The reason here was the judge had been the prosecutor on the case 25 years ago. It came back up for a writ of habeas corpus, and he was disqualified from hearing the arguments on the writ because he'd been the prosecutor. There might be some bias. And the case says a single biased individual might still have an influence that is significant. Were there any single biased individuals in the Trump-Russia investigation? Who was the deputy director of the FBI? Stroke, Page. Mueller's enforcer. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the names now. But these guys are clearly biased. And what this does is it biases the first step along the way. So anything they discover along the way is automatically disqualified. They have to throw it out. And someone asks, is the special counsel order from Rosenstein too broad? Yes, it is. But it doesn't really matter because Mueller came back and asked for this other authority based on what he'd found. What he found was tainted. It was fruit of the poisonous tree. So anything that steps out the next step or two or three or wherever they're going is also tainted. So I would bet that this Southern District of New York stuff with the Trump organization, because it came out of this sequence of events, the judge will have to throw it out no matter what it is. We have a huge evidence of bias, and it should be used to quash. You and I would say squash like a bug. Legally, the term is quash any prosecution. And frankly, this should also be used by General Flynn. Now, he pleaded, but if things look uglier and uglier for Mueller's probe, and remember, they've delayed his sentencing a bunch of times, he may go back and withdraw his plea and tell the judge, look, this is all fruit of the poisonous tree. There is nothing there. It was regarded as truthful testimony in the beginning, and now because of this other, they've decided it's not. I want it thrown out, and he could very well get it thrown out. All right. Yes, Rosenstein approved the FISA and now appointed Mueller. Remember that President Trump has hinted that he may declassify those FISA applications. Has anyone heard the term October surprise? I would bet that that's what we're going to get. That somewhere in October, we find declassified FISA applications, and they show all of the wrongdoing. Although he might do it in late September to give everybody time to dig down through all of those hundreds of pages. Mueller withheld exculpatory testimony from FBI agents who interviewed Flynn. Yes, that's true. And remember that Weinstein, who is his enforcer, and Mueller withheld exculpatory evidence in cases involving Whitey Bulger and Enron. So he has a track record of being bad. That would come up into the discussion. Okay, let me change gears here and get out of politics. I admit I was at church this weekend, and somebody brought up a study that was published in Lancet. And then I saw some other bits and pieces. And when we were golfing, my doctor buddies talked about it a little bit. So I went out and dug it up and looked. And basically, there is a study published within the last 2 weeks that says alcohol in any quantity, whatever, is hazardous to your health. Now, let me back up a little bit. Nobody actually did a new study. This is what's called a meta-analysis. And what happens in a meta-analysis is that you get a whole bunch of papers stuck in a pile. And then you have some reviewers decide, we're going to see if there's any more information we can get out of them. So they'll go through, no, this one, we can't do that. And we can't do that one. And we walk our way through. And, oh, here are 4 papers that are all addressing sort of the same thing. Can we figure out a way to make them actually take their data and actually do something? And of course, the papers that are published don't have the raw data. They have processed data, and you work your way on. And ultimately, they say, oh, we found this wonderful new piece of information. Really? Well, let's back up and look at what the literature has been saying for a long time. We know, for example, that patients in nursing homes who have half a glass of wine with their dinner each night live longer. Well-established fact. We know that people who have no more than 1 glass of wine a day have reduced risk of heart disease. Maybe it's the resveratrol in red wine. We don't know. Nobody's done enough work to tease that out. It's going to take a while to tease all that stuff out. We know also that there is suggestive evidence that drinking wine has a dose-related effect on head and neck and throat cancers. Well, that's interesting. That's where you do it. But when you look at it, it starts at 3 glasses of wine a day and goes up. The studies for that do that. So now we're saying, okay, is it the higher dose? There's some other studies that suggest drinking wine may be associated with an increase in breast cancer. We also know that eating a high-carb diet is associated with an increase in breast cancer. And what is the most common way of drinking wine? At a meal, you're going to have bread and so on, and a lot of people have a high-carb diet where they have the wine with it. So is it the high-carb diet? Is it the wine? Nobody has any data. It hasn't been teased out. So you've got the basic tug of war is between alcohol raises your risk of cancer and alcohol lowers your risk of heart disease. Which one overwhelms the other? Well, this meta-analysis supposedly claims that all of the risks vastly outweigh the rewards. You're going to die from alcohol. That's interesting. One of the things I've been doing is a study on wine in the Bible. And it's pretty clear that wine is considered a blessing. And the wine that is considered a blessing has alcohol in it. Would God give us something as a blessing that's bad for us? Don't think so. Ain't gonna happen. So now I look at this and then I say, now wait a minute, let me read down through this meta-analysis. And I don't get very far into the paper and I run into the line that says, we used a novel method to analyze the data. Oops, red flags, wave them all around. A novel method simply says, we figured out a new way to tease the data and to come up with something that says what we want it to say. You heard me right. It's garbage. And the reason here is simply this. We've had a process in medicine for a long time called peer review, and it's been taken up in most of the scientific disciplines. And basically what you do is you have recognized authorities in the field will read an article as it comes in and will critique it. If they give it the thumbs down, the article disappears. We have classic examples of this all the time. In climate science, people who challenge the 97% orthodoxy about man causing climate change can't get published. In medicine, if you challenge the orthodoxy, it's hard to get published. You can go on and on and on. Geological journals, you can't get published. Why? All of the recognized experts are part of the orthodoxy. And you've got to convince them before they'll even look at your paper with a thought toward doing anything but throwing it away. So that's the first thing. And finally, the Journal of the American Medical Association, in an editorial discussing this very thing, said meta-analyses, remember that's what this alcohol paper was, meta-analyses become weighted averages of expert opinion. In other words, they're worthless. Now, that may be going a little too far because we have seen some things that have proven out to be good with meta-analyses. This one, when it says a novel method and it's a meta-analysis, I wouldn't worry about it. Raise your glass of wine with dinner tonight. It'll probably taste good. And it won't hurt you. It'll be good for your heart. All right, let me see the notes here, the things people have been talking about. How long do I think the Mueller investigation will continue? I have no idea. If his mandate gets constricted where it belongs, it's done. Wasn't alerted to the live broadcast. I'm still learning the ins and outs on all of this. I'll probably get better at it as we go along. I've been announcing it on Twitter, and I guess there's a way to do it here on YouTube that I'm not familiar with. And like I said, I'm learning my way. Do I have any opinion about Steam It? Have no idea. Would I like to stream on DLive? Have no idea. 100% of people who drink alcohol will eventually die. Alcohol should be banned. Yep, and 100% of all people who breathe air will die. So air should be banned as well. So low carb, one wine diet. Okay, biblical times water would kill you. Let me give you a key thing there. If a person from a country with good clean water, like North America, goes to a country with not so good water, like pick any place in South America pretty much, they always tell you don't drink the water. Why? Because it has enteropathogenic E. coli contamination, and it will give you traveler's diarrhea. It'll make you sick. Montezuma's revenge. The reason is you're not used to the bacterium. But if you look at the people who live there, they drink it all the time and they don't get sick. They've developed an immunity to it. And as a result, not a problem. So people drinking so-called unsanitary water in undeveloped areas generally don't have the problems that people in other areas do. Drinking your red wine right now. All right, that's a good way to go. There are 100 other things we could talk about. I think we've covered pretty much all that's really big and important for today. I am going to try to be doing these every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. for about half an hour. And I'm finding it more fun than doing the pre-recorded type ones where I have to do all of the other stuff. I expect I'll be getting some software that lets me pull things off the screen and put it up there as well. So we'll see how things go along the way. And with all new skills, you learn as you go along. Again, thanks for watching. Please remember, this is all done out of the goodness of my heart, except for what people are able to help with supporting on Patreon. I do it to get the message out. Please share the fact that we're doing this and support us on Patreon. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at VidZette. Until next time, I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.